Hello, everyone. It's Kim Corvin. Welcome to my webinar, Winning at Divorce. This is the first time I've used Zoom to do a webinar. I attend Zoom meetings, I run Zoom meetings, but a webinar? So I am feeling just a trifle nervous. And so please bear with me. I am nervous. Who knew? Who knew? So I want you, I'm very, very glad you're here. Now, I suspect the thought of hiring a lawyer makes your stomach clench. I remember when I practiced traditional law, I had an elderly client came to me. She was about 90 and she wanted to do a will. She came to my downtown office. She could hardly tell me her name. Now, I thought, I can't do a will for this person because her brain, she doesn't understand. So I sent her off to see her doctor. Her doctor said she's fine. So I could work on the will. And I went to this woman's home and we sat at her kitchen table. She was a completely different person. She could tell me the names of her 13 children. She knew what she wanted to happen. That was the first time I realized how frightening it is for a person to see a lawyer. It's not something anybody wants to do. And I know when I was going through divorce, I had to see a lawyer about the separation agreement I had prepared, and she didn't like one of the clauses I had in there. I said, there's no mention of custody of our children. Now, I had to sign off on a piece of paper and say I was never going to sue her or the firm when things went sideways. And I remember being so very angry at having to do that. I felt like she was treating me like I was 8 years old. And I thought, this is me who's part of the system. How is it for people who aren't part of the system? Most people would just go, oh, you're the expert. Okay, right? Because you're feeling so diminished when your marriage ends. I knew better. And I also knew that if I did what she suggested, we would have fought in court for 5 years instead of having a really peaceful transition. So it is those two experiences that have led me to create this webinar for you. Now, as I say, this is the first time I've done a webinar on Zoom. I don't usually use PowerPoint, but I thought because I am on a computer, I don't want you to get bored with my face. Let's just have the key points and some images on PowerPoint. So some of you know me, some of you don't know me. Now, who am I? I'm Kim Corvin. And I went to law school in the early 1990s and I was very litigious. Every problem that my family and friends had, I would suggest, let's go to court. That was the only way to resolve things. And indeed, at that time, you had to practice law for 3 years before you could take mediation. I ended up studying mediation because I ended up being drawn to it. Now, I was married. My marriage wasn't working. I asked my husband to leave. He didn't believe in divorce. I'm not going to go into any details, but I will tell you it was not an easy situation. And I figured out how to divorce peacefully. I included some of these timelines, some of these events on this timeline, so you could see that I did something to reclaim me after my marriage ended. And we didn't rush through the legal process. And also, I wanted to be clear that I am no longer a lawyer. I started realizing I could help families more effectively as a mediator, as a consultant, using my knowledge to benefit families, to benefit children. So that is just kind of an overview, little timeline about me and the law and marriage. I also have to do a disclaimer. This is not legal advice. I'm no longer a lawyer. If you need legal advice about your specific situation, you need to hire a lawyer. And I see I'm talking away and I'm still paused on screen sharing. So we are going to resume. So I've done my disclaimer. Before and after divorce, just so you know, there I was in 2006. And you can see my eyes look kind of dead. I was in a lot of pain. I was going through the motions. I didn't see it. My self-esteem was definitely in the toilet. It was not a good time in my life. And then there I am in 2012 when I convocated with my master's in law degree. I look very, very different, right? Like it's just how the difference in how I approach divorce, the positive impact it had on me. And even on, if you look at my daughter, her expression in 2006 compared to 2012, much more confident. It was very good. So I did this so you have some confidence in me. Now, often with divorce, like we are just so, oh, this is awful. We have no idea where we're going. We're looking at the past. We're going to end up someplace we don't want to be. And I've heard that story from people who have been to see mediators. Or, you know, they've said to me, yeah, everything was going fine when we worked with a mediator, and then the lawyers got involved. Or the lawyers get involved and people get scared, so they don't resolve anything for years. I've dealt with people like that on the other side and help them resolve. So it's really important. My goal today is to help you know where you're going. You know where you're going, you can find the right lawyer for you. Now, I've embedded a number of realizations in this webinar. Now, it's important to remember that lawyers are people. We tend to think, oh, you've been to law school? You must be really smart. Or as my former spouse did, he thought I would want to fight with him because I was a lawyer. Now, the thing about lawyers, yeah, we're people. Lawyers are people. Lawyers are trained to think a certain way, okay? Trained to see the world as a series of legal issues. And that was me with my family and friends when I was in law school saying, let's sue, let's sue. What you can do, though, is you can train a lawyer to see what is important to you. And that's part of winning at divorce. So this is all about separation, divorce, and you. Now, I say it's about divorce. This applies whether you're legally married or whether it's a common law situation. It really does, but we tend to think of the whole area as divorce. So that's the word I'm using to describe it. Now, in life, we have two choices. We're either in one of two mental states, and one is a state of fear, and that's the photo on the left. And one is a state of expansion, and there's me with the author Sark playing. So when we're in a state of fear, we are expecting everything to go wrong. We're very diminished. It's really, really hard to move forward. We're stuck. Whereas when we're in the state of expansion, we can actually move forward. We can see so many more possible solutions. It's a lovely, lovely thing. And I just want you right now, I know you've taken time out of your days to be here with me. I want you to I'm going to have you practice on minimizing that fear and moving to the space of expansion. So I would like you to close your eyes, please. And take a deep breath, that deep cleansing breath in through your nose. and out through your mouth. And I want you to keep breathing deeply. And I want you to picture in your mind a place where you feel completely safe. And it could be your grandparents' farm when you were a child. It could be someplace you've been. It could be an image in a magazine, or a place you've read about in a book, or a place you've dreamed about, someplace where you just feel completely safe. The tension goes out of your shoulders and out of your jaw as you're breathing. The tenseness in your stomach, it unclenches. You may feel warmth in your chest. You just feel completely present, and you know that nothing can harm you in that space. And just make it as clear, that image, as clear as you can. And keep breathing deeply. And then I want you to come back to me. Just come back when you're ready. Open your eyes. Open your eyes. Okay. Thank you. So you should be feeling, and the thing about that exercise is you can return to that space, that safe place, anytime you want. And I recommend you using that practice when you're feeling overwhelmed and unsure about what to do, because it will create a space where you can make better decisions and be much more conscious and present. So thank you for doing that. Now, of course, when we're in a place of fear, what do we do? What do we do when we're in a place of fear? We run for safety, right? That's what we want. We want safety. And often safety includes, I'm just going to stay away from what's causing me pain, right? Because we are not trained in how to manage conflict or how to have a difficult conversation. So safety is an absence of pain, is often how we look at it. And we look for somebody to protect us. And if your marriage is ending, because that's the language we use, that the marriage is ending, right, which is fear and sadness based, our tendency is we run towards the legal system. The legal system is going to save us. It's going to protect us. I won't have to speak to my former spouse. My lawyer will speak to his lawyer, and it'll all be good. Okay? And because we're in that place of fear and we lack confidence, I know I was so there. And I wanted to run to the legal system. I remember thinking, I didn't want my husband to have any contact with the children. None. And then I thought to myself, Kim, you know, because you never said anything while you were married, that will just be viewed as a ploy, and you'll just be throwing money away. And it was that knowledge that kept me out of engaging the legal system immediately. So I'm sharing some of that knowledge with you so you can make better decisions. So the second realization is you are going to have to interact with the court. I'm not saying you can completely avoid the legal system. Okay? If you're legally married, you must interact with the court to get divorced. But there's less involved than you think. And I should say too, if either of you has a government, no, I'm backing up. Forget about that. We're just interacting with the court to get divorced. Okay? That's it. So what is divorce? We all think we know what it is. And we'll get there. But this legal system, I'm starting with the foundational piece in building. So our legal system that we use, it was developed in a time when not everyone could read and write. And it was developed in a time when government left the passage of laws primarily to the courts. So I remember I've looked at statutes, revised statutes from 1895, Canadian revised statutes. There's 3 volumes, so less than 30 centimeters of legislation. Today, the last time the federal government had all the statutes together in a series of books was 1985. They go on for 6 meters. So it's really shifted. So before, it was the courts, and you had to know how to read court decisions. You had to understand the law to be able to interpret what it was. So you needed experts, and those experts were lawyers. And the other thing about the law is when courts make the decisions, it's focused on the past, a past wrong. So this is the fabric that divorce is found in. Now, the interesting thing with experts, it's kind of like this picture. The road is closed to the public. When I came across this in the Cypress Hills, the West Block, I was stunned. There it was in the middle of the prairie, these 2 corner posts and the chain and the road closed sign. It's kind of like our legal system historically, where the road was closed to members of the public. Interesting thing in today's world, most people involved in business disputes, 90% of business disputes are solved without involving lawyers. Business people do everything in their power to avoid consulting a lawyer and engaging the legal system. Everything they can. It's the opposite with family law. Stats Canada says there's like 20% of all children, there's no custody order. In divorced homes, no custody orders affecting them. So 80% of the people who get divorced go to court, 20%. There's no mention of children in the court documents. Interesting, right? So the business community has found a way to go beside this chain. And when you're involved in a family law dispute, looking at getting divorced, your tendency is to go, oh, I will rely on a lawyer. That road is closed. So that picture is kind of ridiculous, right? It's like realization 3. Do not expect the legal system to make sense to you. It's based on how society ran in the past and how people were in the past. It just is what it is. You could drive yourself crazy if you tried to figure it out. And I think just accept that it's, like 18th century. It's an 18th century model. And we're in the 21st century. And if you can understand that, you can be a little more at peace with what's happening instead of trying to look for it to make sense. Now, the other thing about the legal system is it is adversarial. So one side wins and the other side loses. And you play to win. Okay, and you take the offense to protect yourself. You take no responsibility for your actions. Now, those 4, if, let's say I bought a car from you, and a week after I bought the car, the transmission fell out of the engine, right? So I would be suing you. You refused to pay me. I'm suing you. I am saying you sold me a lemon. You said it was this, 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 and this. You showed me, you falsified the mechanical records because clearly it couldn't be that way. And you defend and say, no, Kim, you forgot, you drove the crap out of it, right? I take no responsibility when I sue you. You take no responsibility. Because the thought is, if you take responsibility, you are exposing yourself to potential liability, so you don't go there. That's how the legal system works. And it's okay if it's a car, but if it's a mom and dad, and the argument revolves over who parents the children when, it can really blow up. It's like pouring gasoline on a fire. Now, the other thing about the legal system is it's objective. There's no place for feelings. I remember years ago having a client in my office sharing her hopes and dreams with me. And I looked at her and I said, do you have an employee assistance program through work? Oh, yes, I do, Kim. And I said, well, I think you should investigate using it because it would be much more cost effective for you to share this information with a person there than paying me $150 an hour. Because as much as I'm interested in hearing this, I can't use it. It's not relevant to the legal issues. So these are a couple things, that adversarial system and it being objective, they really cause friction for people who are involved, who have to engage it when they don't know. Now, this is not what I mean by adversarial. Although the adversarial system can lead to some horrible results. I mean, most of the women who are murdered, it's in their homes, it's by a former spouse or a current spouse. It's something to be aware of, and I know it certainly has had an impact on my family. I had a cousin who was involved in a really ugly divorce battle. They were really playing to win, and he lost. And his wife had custody, interim custody, child support, spousal support. He hardly was able to see his children, and nobody knew, but he was really depressed. And he ended up taking his own life. So the adversarial system can have a real negative impact on people. And it's something because, this is families. This is all about love. And it's important to understand that when you're engaged with a lawyer, because ultimately there's your legal issues, and then there's you as a human being and what's important. So my cousin's wife, she won the legal issues, but at the end of the day, she lost too. So something to think about. And it's something to be aware of when you're thinking about working with a lawyer. Now, something else that's really critically important to know is that you and your lawyer are going to have different views of success, right? The lawyer is going to see success in terms of the legal issues. You're going to see success differently. For example, when I was a baby lawyer, I think my first court case, I got to do a small claims case for a fellow who he had entered into a contract. He had a trailer on a rented lot, and the mobile home park agreed. He entered into a contract with them. He was going to build a fence around his lot, and they were going to pay him for the materials, for the wood, and he would donate his labor. That was the agreement. And he built the fence. They didn't pay. They refused to pay. So he hired me to go to small claims court. And I was even more afraid then than I am today. Because the other side, they came with one of those fence boards. I was thinking, how do I deal with this? And I dealt with it, and we got a written decision later. And the court found in my client's favor. The only thing my client didn't get was the GST on the lumber. Now, I was so excited, right? Because going to court to me then was the gold standard. We were successful. We won. I was just so thrilled. So I phoned my client and I told him, and man, I got such a surprise because he was angry. The court had not awarded him the GST, and how could the court miss that fact? Like, he was livid. And I could not figure it out for the longest time until one day, and this was really bothering me because I felt so good about we had won. It was really bothering me. And one day it came to me. I remembered the first conversation I had with this gentleman. He had told me that his daughter and grandkids lived in that rental property. And it was on a busy street. And he wanted his grandchildren to stay safe. I'd forgotten that in the legal issues. So the next time we spoke, and he started getting on a rant about the court getting it all wrong, I said to him, didn't you build that fence to keep your grandchildren safe? And he stopped, like, whoa, and his voice changed. Yes, I did. And after that, he was fine with the result. But that story exemplifies how lawyers and clients view success differently. So you need to educate your lawyer and keep your vision of success front and center for your lawyer so you can both be on the same page. Now, what is a lawyer? We think we know what lawyers are, right? We know, somebody who's been to law school. We all think lawyers are really smart. And yeah, but a lawyer is also an officer of the court, which means you must uphold the laws. So my lawyer who signing that separation agreement, when I didn't mention custody, she was wanting me to uphold the law because that's her obligation. And she was wanting to protect me from potential future harm. She was doing her job, okay? Now, the other thing about lawyers is lawyers in Canada are governed by other lawyers. So there is a regulatory body that says, here's what you can do and can't do, and here's how you need to act. Now, and they set the ethical obligations. So a lawyer must put the client's legal interests before the lawyer's own interests. And you've got a professional obligation to represent your client, one person, to the best of their knowledge and ability. That's what my lawyer was doing with that separation agreement. And yeah, that's what she was doing. Now, you're supposed to avoid conflicts of interest at all cost. So for me, when I was a lawyer doing mediation work, it got to be tricky for me. And I realized, given my ethical obligations as a lawyer, I should be representing one person. And I felt much more comfortable leaving the law than practicing in a more traditional form. Because I think we need to focus on the family is what I grew to believe. So to avoid those whole conflict of interest issues, I ceased practicing. Now, the other thing a lawyer must do is advise the client of how they're billed. And usually with a lawyer, that's on an hourly basis, and anticipated charges in advance. Like if you're going to be billed for photocopies, long distance charges, court fees, those kinds of things. Yeah. And of course, when a lawyer, and it was interesting, whenever somebody would phone me and want me to work for them, I never questioned the fact that I would just quote an hourly fee. This is years ago, and I practiced traditionally because that's how everybody does it. But for a client, you have no idea what you're going to end up paying. And something else, the lawyer's job is to focus on your legal interests and to protect the client against possible harm. So my lawyer with the custody and the separation agreement, and having to sign off that when things went sideways, I would never sue her or the firm because I had not followed her professional advice. right? It was all about my legal interests. The custody needed to be mentioned in that agreement because that was my legal interest, but I knew that that would make us fight. So that's something else that causes tension, and it's okay. It's just a function of the lawyer's job. It's nothing personal. Now, what a lawyer is supposed to do in the lawyer-client relationship is they listen to you to ascertain the legal, what are the legal issues, explain the law to you, apply the law to your situation. And that can involve doing some research because the law changes. Suggest options to you so that you can so then you've got information to make an informed decision, and then take instructions. The lawyer is supposed to do what you want, but if there's an issue with the law and what you want to do, you might have to do what I did, which was sign off and say, I'm doing this against your professional advice. And something you might want to do if you come to that position is get a second opinion from a different lawyer, just to double check your options. Now, so a lawyer's job is not to guarantee success. The court is deciding. So there's a 50% chance that you will be successful and a 50% chance that the other side will be successful. And you don't know what the outcome will be ever. And likewise, a lawyer's job is not to do everything the client wants. And what comes to mind is Paul Bernardo, who was a horrific guy who murdered young women in Ontario. And he gave his lawyer tapes of him torturing these young women. And then he said to his lawyer, do not disclose, do not share these tapes with anybody. And the lawyer didn't share the tapes with the police, and the lawyer got into a lot of trouble. Okay? Also, a lawyer's job is not to focus on your feelings. You focus on the law. And I feel like, this information is all second nature to me, but it's not something that's shared often with the public. And to be able to figure out divorce and what you want, understanding these fundamental portions, I think, are critically important because they empower you. You can make better decisions if you understand what the framework is. It's almost like going to another country where you don't understand the culture. So this is just a little trip into law culture. And in terms of divorce, what is it legally? Well, divorce, it's just that ending of your marriage. That's all divorce is. Everything else is a corollary. And government has decided that you get divorced by going to court. That was a reform that started in 1857, if you can believe it. So when I say, these historic roots, yeah. And the court has the discretion to say yes or no to your application. Now, one thing that a court must be satisfied of is that the lawyer has asked you, do you want to reconcile? And you've said no. The interesting thing is, from a practical standpoint, that traditionally has been found in the petition. The petition is the court document that starts the divorce proceeding. So by that time, you've already prepared and given the lawyer all the information you need, so it's a little late. So the fight is already on. And the other things the court is looking for is one of the causes of divorce present. So there's three of them. There's infidelity, there's physical or mental cruelty to the extent that you can no longer live together, and living separate and apart for at least 1 year. And that last one didn't come into existence until 1985. So you may have people in your family, as I do, who separated in the early 1980s. There was no infidelity. There was no physical or mental cruelty. None of the grounds for divorce fit their situation. So they had to stay married, legally married, but living completely separate lives. Now, I shared that about divorce because you need to realize you and your spouse can decide nearly everything else, subject to a few exceptions. So, for example, if you have a government pension, and this applies if you're married or not, in Saskatchewan at least, you need to have a separation agreement signed by lawyers. You need to have lawyers explain your legal rights and responsibilities too. And likewise, with child support, the Supreme Court of Canada has said you cannot contract out of your obligation to pay financial support for children. There's a process in traditional divorce, people. So one spouse moves out, they're not talking. You hire a lawyer. That lawyer talks to your spouse's lawyer, and so it's at least $40 per conversation each. The lawyer starts a court action. The other spouse hires a lawyer, files a response. There's applications made about who stays in the house, when children are parented, all of that. Instead of the people sitting down together and saying, what are we going to do here? They go to court. Court makes a decision that remains in effect until trial or until people settle matters. Then all the information is exchanged. Then you sit down with a judge, written arguments prepared, sit down with a judge to try to settle everything. And if you can't settle, it goes to trial. So there's lots of involvement with those outside experts. And the cost is there, okay? So the cost of traditional divorce per person, if it's low conflict, you're getting along, there you go. And this was information from the Canadian Research Institute for Law and the Family. They did a survey, it was voluntary, 166 lawyers in BC, Alberta, Ontario, and Nova Scotia responded. Now, the high conflict, and this is per person numbers. So on average, if it's a high conflict divorce, it was $53,000 per person. So a lot of money. And these are per person. So traditional divorce, using the lawyers every step of the way, is a costly thing. And I don't know about you, but do you want to give all your money to lawyers? So there are other traditional options that are still primarily based on husband versus wife, two separate entities. And there's collaborative law, which lawyers are trained to work together. And it's to gather interests. It's everybody's on the same team to use other experts, financial experts, divorce coaches. Arbitration is you hire an arbitrator. An arbitrator is like a judge who's not appointed by the court. An arbitrator is paid for by the parties and decides the legal issues. And collaborative law, legal issues. Mediation is you hire somebody who helps you talk and identify the issues and solve them. And then there is your do it yourself option. I mean, you can go to the courthouse in Saskatchewan and get all the divorce forms for $10. Or you can even go to, there's an organization called PLEA, Public Legal Education Association, and they have a database. They've actually got software that's free that you can input all your information and it will print the divorce forms and a separation agreement. So there's some really low cost options. Now they are all traditional, and there's potentially some involvement of lawyers in all of them, like mediation and do it yourself. You may want to get that independent legal advice. And I have a cat scratching at the door, I apologize. But there you go. If you need independent legal advice, you're going to need lawyers, okay? You could be represented by lawyers at arbitration. And collaborative law, it is two lawyers working together with you who are stick handling the process. And the lawyers in collaborative law, they sign contracts with you saying, you can't settle, they're not going to represent you in court. So those are, and so it's from the most litigious on the left to the most collaborative really on the right. And I should say there are legislative changes coming into effect with the Divorce Act. We are going to have, before people can file that divorce petition, they're going to need to try mediation, collaborative law, or arbitration. And the court may, in cases, order even afterwards that people participate in that to try to reduce the amount of fighting that occurs in court. So those changes are coming into effect July 1. And then there are non-traditional options like me. So the thing about dispute resolution is it keeps evolving. Like at one time there was no mediation. A lawyer in Colorado kind of started it. There was no such thing as collaborative law. A lawyer named Stu Webb started it. And the gentle way divorce, I really work with people who want to put their kids first, who really want peaceful outcomes and who want to honor the relationship that they had. The gentle way divorce, the gentle way is the English translation for the word judo. And this is a pile of the medals I accumulated when I was a kid. And you'll see there, I actually placed bronze, placed third at the nationals. And judo is based on two principles. The first one is mutual welfare and benefit. And the second one is maximum efficiency with minimum effort. Those are the principles that underlie what I do. And I really believe people need to talk and they need to be able to use their words. And if they can treat each other with grace and respect and remember the love, they can transform the process. And part of being the boss is you're empowered when you have to interact with lawyers. So it's a different starting point. Instead of husband versus wife, it's like you are a family. You may not be living together anymore, but likely you're still going to be a family. And let's honor that. Now, so this is realization 8. You have options and you don't have to follow that traditional approach, the litigation stream, unless that is what you want or unless that suits your circumstances. So in some cases, when one spouse has been, like in some cases, that court model actually is really required. It just is. What it comes down to is, what do you want? And, you know, we tend to think, oh, look at me, I'm getting ahead. What do we want? What do you want? I want you now to take your pen and paper, and I want you to think about those questions. I gave each of you that handout with the 6 questions about what you wanted. What's most important to you? I want you just to write it out. Like, is it your legal rights, enforcing them? Is it low cost? Is it being able to sit with your spouse when your child graduates from high school? Or, you know, to be able to sit at the head table side by side when your child gets married? What is it? And I want you just to take 2 minutes and write it out. What is the most important to you? And I'm not going to say anything for 2 minutes. I'm going to let you do that. All right. When I divorced, I set a goal. And what I wanted, it wasn't tangible. It wasn't to make my spouse pay. Like, actually, I wanted to make him pay. I really did. I could hardly stand the sight of him. And if he would even like touch my arm, I would just cringe and want to throw up. That's honest. But that wasn't the goal I set. The goal I set was I wanted my children to have the best relationship possible with their dad. Right? Because I knew they would always love him. And it was that goal that I evaluated everything. And it was because of that goal that I found the strength to say no when my lawyer wanted me to follow best legal practices. So knowing that goal really, and knowing it in your soul is really what will help you win at divorce. And whatever your goal is, it's fine, right? It is your goal. If you want to make your spouse pay, that's okay, right? Because it's your goal. Now, if you don't have a lot of money and want to spend, if your goal is, to spend less than $1,000, that's okay too, because there are ways to do that. And I shared some of them, right? With plea.org. Court fees are $400 to $500, but you can do that. It's all good because you are the expert of your family. And it's really about getting clear in what you want. And so, yeah, realization 9, you're not going to get what you want if you don't own your power as the CEO of your family. That Yogi Berra quote, close to the start, right? If you don't know where you're going, you may end up someplace else. That's what'll happen, right? If you don't know what you want, it's all too easy for the legal issues to become all important and to take over. And then you're left feeling trauma and conflict for years. And I guess another potential goal is if you want it done quickly, because if you're in a high conflict traditional divorce stream, the average time to resolution is 30 months. Whereas the average time for mediation in that survey was 6 months. And there's the emotional cost too. So it's whatever is important for you at this moment is perfect. So finding the right lawyer, it really depends on what you want. Truly, because lawyers have different strengths and different interests. Now, a reputable source to find out, like if you want a peaceful lawyer or a lawyer who litigates, is www.canley.org. Canley is the Canadian Legal Information Institute, and it has all the published cases. So you can, choose the jurisdiction, which means the province you're in, and you can input a lawyer's last name, and you can find out how many times that lawyer has been to court. Now, if you were to search my name there, it's going to come up more than 100 times. And it's an example of how you have to look a little more closely, because most of those are decisions I wrote as a hearing officer for the Office of Residential Tenancies. So they're not times when I was an advocate for clients. But it's a good way of knowing, like if you want somebody who's peaceful and you are thinking about a lawyer and you check and go, oh, 800 times this person has been to court, you might want to look someplace else, another person. And you can, when I was a lawyer, the questions I would get asked usually were, what was my hourly rate? How much of a retainer did I need, i.e., how much money did the client have to pay me up front? Would I accept payments over time? Those were the main questions. Really, those questions could cost you a lot of unnecessary money. And depending on what outcome you want, they may be the perfect questions for you. And you might want to ask these questions instead. And one is, why do you practice family law? Right? You might want to ask, have you ever been divorced? And if you have been, well, what's your relationship like with the other spouse? You could ask, what is the least most you have ever billed a family law client? That's a really good question, because, if you go to buy a car, when you leave the lot what car you're buying, what color it is, what features it has, and you know how much you're paying. That doesn't happen when you hire a lawyer. You know how much you're paying per hour. You know how much you have to give the lawyer to represent you, but you don't know what the final price will be. So that question, what's the least and the most you've ever billed a family law client, will give you an idea. And that's empowering. So you can make a decision, is this the person for you or not? And you also might want to ask, how many times did you appear in court last year on family law matters? Right? Because if you're going to want your spouse to pay, you want somebody who can represent you in court. Another good question, what is your comfort level when a client refuses to follow your professional advice? Because I had mediation clients take their agreement to lawyers and the lawyers go, well, I can't let you sign this. It's good for you to know that in advance, because that may not be somebody who you want to hire. And what is your experience in alternative dispute resolution? So really, if you want a peaceful outcome. So those are some of the questions, and they'll change a little bit depending on what your wants are. But they're much more effective questions than simply about price, and they're much more likely to get you the result you want. And, I just thought I would share with you how I could help. Now, I started this new business October 1st, so I still have space for clients. So I would really appreciate it if you could actually tell your friends and family about me if you found this presentation valuable. Now, the one thing I offer everybody is a complimentary 20-minute From Chaos to Calm and Confident session, because I well remember that feeling like a complete loser and not knowing where to turn. Even as a lawyer, like I was just so scared, and it took me 3 years to find the courage to ask my husband to leave. So I offer this, and the other thing I will be sharing if you sign up for one of these sessions is I have a one-page document that I usually just give to my clients on statements you can make when you're dealing with your lawyer so you can get the results you want without getting bogged down. So to sign up for that complimentary session, there's a checkbox on the home page, the landing page of my website. So, and as I said before, I've been quite transparent. I am not tech savvy. You will have to type this in